The following program was funded through a grant from the Springfield Cable Endowment.
The circuit I was in years ago, we played in a lot of white clubs, but the musicians weren't allowed to either mingle with the people, go to the bar. We would have to go and stay in the kitchen.
In the early 1960s, Black America was a segregated neighborhood, but on the street was a drive toward change.
What do you hope to achieve in the long run?
We hope to achieve freedom, justice, and equality for the black people here in America, who up to now have been relegated to second-class citizenship.
Making efforts at having completely open cities. That's what the integration means, an open society.
Popular leaders paced a growing civil rights movement where many groups sought various goals but had a central theme.
If we are to move to higher heights of maturity and brotherhood and understanding all over the world, we must get rid of the notion once and for all that there are superior and inferior races.
We are conscientious in favor of separation of the races. Now, you may think that this ought not to be, but my young friends, you must deal with facts as they are, not as you think they ought to be.
I see ourselves as joining a great national witness.
The country watched protesters face brutal opposition as the medium of television news brought national issues into homes and into the light. Society came face to face with its racial separation, and the new media itself was no exception.
When I was at Channel 40, I don't recall exactly how the subject came up, but the general manager there made it very clear at a meeting we had that the only niggers he'd have on the staff there would be the janitor.
Law supported segregation in the South, but a reality as stark as black and white dictated substandard housing, low-status jobs, and inferior education for African Americans in the North.
We see it more today than ever before, that the problem of racial injustice is a national problem. It's not a sectional problem. Discrimination and segregation exist in the South in their glaring and conspicuous forms, but they exist in the North in hidden and subtle forms.
Maybe we're no better and no worse than other communities of this size, but when you compare where Springfield has come in the past 13 years, we've made a lot of progress.
Seeing the court battles and boycotts of the 50s as a call to arms, students attending school in the South began the head-on attack of bigotry and prejudice.
Down there, I would have been.
Well, there's been one or two incidents when I've really been fairly nervous about being down there.
From the beginning of the year, February 60, through the fall of 61, when I entered Howard, you had the student sit-ins, which swept through the South that entire winter and spring. Then that summer, the Freedom Rides, and the birth of SNCC within that context in Raleigh, North Carolina. So by the time I got to Howard, I was involved in the sit-ins.
Mr. Cobb, you must be pretty proud of your son.
Indeed I am, Ken. It's good to have him home, but it is certainly a fight that I endorse.
Sit-ins that openly defied Southern segregation policy at chain store lunch counters led to sympathy pickets at northern outlets.
So we commend these young people.
In Springfield, demonstrations at the downtown Woolworths resulted in 2 arrests. Police cited a local ordinance prohibiting placards on Main Street. A judge soon found the ban unconstitutional, and authorities acquiesced. But in Dixie, local government often ignored the courts. Rulings to dismantle color barriers in the law were resisted, prompting calls for further action.
We think we have a moral obligation to express our concern by speaking to our representatives in Congress and making known to our president the desire that we have for a stronger hand to be shown by the federal government in the Alabama affairs.
At the universities of Mississippi, then Alabama, it took presidential intervention to register black students over the objections of their state governors.
Governor George Wallace appeals for calm and prepares to confront a deputy U.S. attorney. On the White House that evening, President Kennedy makes an appeal to the nation.
Following a series of threats and defiant statements, the presence of Alabama National Guardsmen.
Well, Mrs. Ells, how do you feel about the situation?
I think that all citizens should have privileges
and freedom of education.
Of all of the things we have witnessed in the last several years, there are none that can compare with the acts of courage and fortitude and perseverance that we see being demonstrated in the country today by these young Negro citizens.
At an NAACP rally, local leaders said it was a serious time for race relations, not only in Alabama, but also in Springfield.
Or no longer can this country, can this community tolerate a social order which treats the average Negro population as second-class citizens.
Alabama, we're going to turn it into an inferno for freedom unless they are willing to grant the people some elementary rights.
Fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city.
The civil rights movement was spreading, and so was fear of the social upheaval it could bring.
Basic concerns of the Negro here as well as anywhere else.
In the early 60s, if we were on the street with picket signs, we were considered radicals and upstarts.
Instead of demonstration, we are stressing voter registration.
Both by the black and the majority community, and even to the point that I had a person tell me, don't bring your communistic ideas to this community. It was a black person saying, because we had it very nice here all these years, and you're just coming here creating problems and trouble.
Paul, do you feel that demonstrations have a place in our society today here in Springfield?
No, I do not.
In the wake of increasing racial violence and tension around the country, a position was established to coordinate minority issues.
When Mayor Ryan called me into his office and asked me if I would take this position, I felt a sense of honor that he would select me out of all the people in the city. But he didn't know what to tell me to do. He just told me what his aim was.
The mayor and other community leaders talked about making peaceful progress toward eliminating discrimination in the city.
I was tremendously impressed by this first meeting on the proposed Conference of Race and Religion. There are many signs in the local community that we are on the correct road to the solution of the problems that pertain to the Negro in the city of Springfield.
The road that summer for more than 300,000 citizens led to the nation's capital and a pinnacle of optimism.
There were some things going on in Springfield that weren't right, and when I realized this was a march for justice for all people, and that large numbers of people would be there, I really could not wait to go.
We went down on the bus, and it was a very bonding experience, just a bus ride.
We rode all night and got to Washington about 8 o'clock in the morning. But everyone was enthused. I don't think anyone slept on that bus. It was August 28, 1963. It was one of the hottest days I can remember.
The bitter rights struggle had become a dominant domestic issue. With landmark legislation pending in Congress, the March on Washington held forth the idea of civil change without civil war.
We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote, and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote.
Though many spoke from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial that day, it was the powerful voice of Martin Luther King that echoed long after.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created.
We came back from the March on Washington. A lot of people were inspired, and they wanted to get involved in the movement.
I feel that this way, by actually participating, maybe we can, or maybe that I can feel that I am actually contributing something to the cause.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
A rude awakening came just days after the march. Attempts to stop Negro children from attending white schools reignited a simmering Birmingham. Weeks of street clashes culminated in a church bombing that killed 4 little black girls. The spotlight on the fight to desegregate Southern schools helped illuminate a similar problem in the North.
The de facto situation did not really become extremely serious until recent years because of in-migration of Negro Americans. Here, for instance, in Springfield in the 1940s, your school system had relatively few Negro American students, and so there was very few concentrations. Now you have an elementary school of over 90% Negro Americans.
Racially separate neighborhoods created racially separate schools.
De facto segregated schools. We think these imbalanced schools in the North are not as serious, but almost as serious in their detrimental effects that the segregated system in the South has had.
During the fall election season, a call to reduce division in education would increase division in the community.
Well, Mr. Lynch, papers are being circulated in your behalf for the office of mayor. Are you giving this a lot of thought?
I am giving it a great deal of thought, Ed.
The 1963 mayoral race pitted Registrar of Deeds John Pierce Lynch
the mayor is not to be taken lightly.
against first-term incumbent Charles V. Rye.
To the consensus of opinion among people, do they want to change?
Lynch had run a conventional campaign in his 3rd attempt for the office, but he trailed in the polls, and with the election just 2 weeks off, seized on the emotional de facto segregation debate.
It was a very critical time in the United States at that time. There was this whole movement towards integrated education, or let's say busing, to bring about integrated education. People were very, very uptight about it, virtually in all segments of the community. And so it was a serious and kind of scary thing when he decided to make that the centerpiece of his campaign.
The Margaret Ells Elementary School on Cortlandt Street was overcrowded, and the school committee transferred some of those students by bus to Memorial School over in the East Forest Park section. These were largely, if not completely black kids being transferred over to this predominantly white school. John Pierce Lynch seized on this as busing.
He gave a list of schools in the white areas of the city and said that I and the NAACP had entered into a conspiracy and that these other schools would be next. This wasn't the case at all.
We have to work within a certain atmosphere of fear and confusion on the
As
parts
mayor,
of many people,
Ryan
both
chaired the school committee.
Negro and white, in this community on this particular issue.
He had voted to look for ways to begin addressing imbalance by the next school year, but the majority of committee members balked at an implementation date.
No matter how they wanted to put it, it was going, the ultimate in the situation was busing.
My opinion was that children did not need to be on buses for 2 hours a day, in some cases many more.
New to the mayoral campaign, the de facto debate had been the dominant issue of school board races throughout.
I also believe that most parents really wanted their children to go to a school nearest the home, which meant that I believe that we were going to see a lot of white flight from the city of Springfield.
Ryan also feared migration of whites to the suburbs.
Reasonable decision which will enable us to maintain the neighborhood school concept and yet attack.
In fact, he supported only alternatives to forced busing.
Real problem of racial imbalance.
The centerpiece of this campaign had been to take advantage of the racial tensions throughout the country, let alone in the city of Springfield.
Why, they talk about we in Alabama feel a certain way. Why, in Boston, Massachusetts, a woman received the largest vote of any candidate who was vigorously opposed by the NAACP. And you know what issue was involved. In the backyard of Mr. Kennedy, a woman led the ticket named Mrs. Hicks.
It is now up to the people.
As Boston School Committee chair, Louise Day Hicks was Massachusetts' loudest opponent to busing.
What steps will now be taken?
She was brought to Springfield as a political move for John Pierce Lynch. She was stirring up enough hatred in Boston. We didn't feel that it should spill over into Springfield. And that's when we organized a picket.
Protesters greeted Hicks outside the Lynch campaign rally.
We knew the law, you can't close it completely, so we closed it so they had to squeeze through the ramp that we had in front of this building. But by and large, people on the school committee, in regard to what we were trying to do at that time, they were just as bad as Louise Days Hicks, because they brought her here and hoped that she could raise the concerns in the white communities.
I just couldn't make head or tail out of what impact this was going to have on the community. I really didn't.
The only determination of that, I think, will be tomorrow at the polls. In my mind, de facto segregation is an important issue.
Probably within an hour or so, we knew that we had had a great victory, and to me, that was a victory of the people of Springfield.
The issue hadn't swayed the outcome of the mayor's race, but the school committee vote was decidedly anti-busing.
The basic importance of that issue is not whether you bus children from one district to another, but whether you try to see that every child, white or colored, receives equal opportunity of education.
The head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference spoke at the 1964 Springfield College commencement while out on bail from a Florida arrest.
We have caused the St. Augustine community to know that something must be done in order to solve the problem. We have created the kind of crisis that has
Although the civil rights movement fostered confrontation, moderate leaders promised unity in the end.
Must be done.
However, other voices called for gaining equality through self-reliance, not integration.
Well, Mr. X, do you have a split with the NAACP in the way they're carrying out the fight for Negro rights?
Well, both of them
Ed, I think
have the same goal, but they have different ways of achieving it. But they try to instill self-esteem and pride in the black community.
It is not any disagreement we have with the NAACP and their objectives, but
the Nation of Islam advocated a divided society.
A solution to our problem will be brought about by us forcing ourselves into white neighborhoods. He says that we should clean up our own neighborhoods and bring our own neighborhoods up to par, and then we'll be respected by everyone.
Well, how about these reports that you're against everyone and everything, that you're anti-everything?
No, they say we're anti-white, anti-Semitic, and anti-many other things, but actually we're anti-wrong. We're anti-oppression, we're anti-exploitation, we're anti-second-class citizenship, and those who are guilty of practicing these things say that we're anti-them.
Negative impressions were often fueled by Malcolm's confrontational rhetoric.
We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us.
Following the assassination of President Kennedy, he said the chickens had come home to roost, a statement generally interpreted as an endorsement of the killing.
Terrible thing, my stomach just did.
The religious sect censored their leading spokesman for his comments, maintaining they were both apolitical and peaceful. But their extremist preaching and rapid growth alarmed many.
Is the button of the Muslims led by Elijah Muhammad, I believe. Would the fact that there is a very active mosque in Springfield next door to the Shine Inn have anything to do with your selecting this location to train?
No, no, no. I mean, wherever you go in America today, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has this Islamic mosques set up all over the country.
Muhammad Ali became the Nation of Islam's most recognizable figure after Malcolm's break with the group. He was no less controversial.
Anywhere in the world you go, I mean, America, you find it.
We went to the mosque at the corner of Oak and Tyler. We walked in, my partner and I, and the fellow went back. He's a security officer. Security man, rather. Went back there and talked with somebody. Came back and said to me, "You go in. You, white officer, you stay here."
Police had paid the black Muslims a visit to investigate rumors that they were planning to cause trouble at an upcoming inner-city event.
This is the playground to William N. DeBerry School. It's much different now than when it was when I was here. There used to be houses all along this area, but now there's a baseball field. This has been a
When the DeBerry School playground first opened in August of '64, people gathered to celebrate.
We heard reports that there could be trouble last night. We took precautionary measures.
We called in the control squad, and we had them transported up to Colton Street, which is the water department garage, to stand by, which is approximately 2 or 3 blocks from DeBerry School. And we sat there for, I'd say maybe an hour or so. and found that there was no need for us at all.
White. At no time was there anything that even slightly resembled an incident. There was many young boys and girls from a park department band, a basketball game. It was really quite a festive occasion in spite of the tension which hung over the area, mainly because of the rumors which had been circulating, which I think many people in the city were aware of.
Only after news that the National Guard had been alerted appeared in the Boston Globe.
Headlines in the Boston paper this morning or in our own paper this evening.
Did the Springfield Union report the story? Editors claimed they didn't want to unduly alarm the public.
Dr. English, the local newspaper in covering your annual report seized upon 1%, overemphasized it.
They've been criticized for overplaying the potential of racial violence just weeks before.
This community are much too alert to let these situations happen here in Springfield.
I think they are alert.
With racial unrest spreading north, people were quick to see danger lurking.
Conferences that we've had around in private homes, in schools, in churches, and whatnot, have made people so sensitive and especially alert to the potential for this sort of thing that if the situation got to the place where it was going to erupt, we would know about it well in advance.
This is something that we did get reports from many areas of the white and the Negro community.
Louis Farrakhan, then known as Louis X, came in from Boston.
Know that we are not seeking any aggression, nor are we violent, nor do we have arms, nor do we steal, rob, or loot.
We had to take some credence of the reports.
We would like to warn our people.
Precautionary measures.
Well-armed white people.
I spoke to the governor.
This blood of ours.
Told him we didn't need any help.
Flowing in the streets of America.
We didn't want any help.
Is not necessary.
We wouldn't ask for any help until there was actually an outbreak of violence.
We regard this as a purposeful attempt on the part of the city administration.
We don't make up these kind of rumors. Delicacy,
among the people, so the Muslim followers
danger,
of the Honorable
fooling with the emotions of people on such a serious issue as this.
And also to hinder the success of our African Unity Bazaar.
The mayor called me and Chief Lyons together in his office.
City, at which time the heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali, will be the guest of honor of the local Muslims.
The mayor was on his way to, I think, to the Democratic Convention. But while he was out of town, Muhammad Ali was coming to town under the auspices of the local mosque. He told Chief Lyons that one of the things that had exacerbated the situation in Springfield was an overexposure of police. So he wanted everything to be kept on a low level. The surprise that came to me was the fact that the chief paid the mayor no attention at all.
Chief Lyons, the commission made it unanimous in selecting you for the full title of chief. You've been around the police department a long time. How does it feel to reach the top of the ladder?
Well, I'm very gratified, Ed, to be selected.
John Lyons had been appointed police chief, despite the mayor's stated preference for another candidate.
The last year and a half.
My choice would have been Deputy Chief McCarthy. A majority of the police commission voted for John Lyons, and that was that.
Various assignments so that the citizens of Springfield will be best served in the area of law enforcement.
Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Hey! Rumble, young man, rumble. Hey!
Urban renewal was changing the face of Springfield's North End. In its wake, hundreds of low-income families were relocated to the hastily constructed Riverview apartments in the Brightwood area.
The situation in Brightwood is very acute at the present time. We're transporting several hundred students out of the area, and these students are attending Hooker Street School. And with the 291 coming through, it's going to put that school out of action, and we're going to have to find a place for those kids.
In early 1963, a site for a new school was picked near the predominantly minority housing complex. Within a year, however, the school committee was forced to re-examine its choice when concerns arose about adding to the de facto segregation problem.
We've had 2 locations proposed by the school department, and now this third one proposed by Reverend Cobb.
Some suggested building campus-style schools.
Have made the traditional neighborhood school as obsolete as the one-horse shay or the 8-party line.
They hoped drawing children from a large area would avoid racial imbalance in the future.
1,000 pupils.
But the pressure was on for a more immediate solution.
The most I can do at this point is to make available to our youth the opening of some doors which have been closed to me.
We want to go forward. And no one can fault us for wanting the best for our children.
I think the white child has been deprived by not having the opportunity to go to school with other children.
I think this report has offered the simple, direct advice and remedies that can correct them now.
Calls for action came not only from minority groups, but also from a statewide Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee.
Worsen the whole situation for a number
all the
of
members
children.
on the board that made up this report, some
Still,
21
school
people,
committee
first
members
of all,
resisted.
aren't close to the problem. They all live out in neighborhoods that are not in this area that they're discussing about.
You've been on the receiving end of some criticism, Mrs. Coughlin.
There was a lot of pressure at the time, believe me. There were telephone calls in the middle of the night and many things.
How do you feel about that in terms of this Blue Ribbon report?
Well, of course, I have said all along that no matter what we did, it was going to be busing, and the Blue Ribbon Committee has come up with nothing
More
but
than a year
busing.
since the board voted to search for ways of reducing imbalance, advocates for change claimed they hadn't begun to look.
Is there any other alternative to busing, Mrs. Lynch?
Well, very frankly, Harry, I would say that it would take somebody wiser than Solomon to figure that out.
We were negotiating with the school committee for over a year and trying to get them to do something about some of the problems that they had in the schools. And then my oldest daughter, she went to Buckingham Junior High School, and when she came home for the first day, she brought books that were from Kylie.
Schools that were predominantly white was getting more resources than those that were predominantly black. And it was our notion that if the schools was racially balanced, then all of the schools would get resources equally.
And they wouldn't move, and so that's when we had the suit against the school committee in the city.
I can't understand Judge Sweeney's ruling.
The U.S. District Court ruled that a form of segregation existed in 8 Springfield schools, and that plans must be made to relieve the situation.
I'm very strong against the ruling. I'm surprised that Judge Sweeney...
This is only a district court opinion. We have a responsibility to our school system to have the appeals court hear this.
I believe that we must appeal it.
Taking it to the highest court in the land.
Supreme Court. Supreme Court.
I would like to definitely see it go to the Supreme Court to clarify this.
The city appealed the first court decision because we felt that it was necessary to have a longer time or more time in order to make sure that this was being done right. Of course, the minorities wanted it done the following day, and the white people in Springfield felt that more time was going to be necessary.
In June, the school superintendent outlined rudimentary long-range plans calling for limited open enrollment but no busing. However, hardliners wanted to wait for the final court decision before discussing any action. Activists felt they had waited long enough. The next day, a multiracial group staged an act of civil disobedience unprecedented in Springfield.
What is your reaction to this happening this morning?
Well, I think it was uncalled for, Ed. This is a case where the school committee is earnestly addressing itself to this problem. We know it's there. Frankly, I think it hurts the situation. It creates a climate where you can get extreme actions on both sides of this thing. That's what we try to avoid.
The Congress of Racial Equality vowed to apply constant pressure as they sat in a school department office.
CORE was organized as a nonviolent direct action organization, basically to engage in peaceful protests to accomplish equal opportunity for people of all races, all colors, all creeds, having been organized in Chicago, Illinois. This was, in 1965, this was the headquarters for the Springfield chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality, better known as CORE.
When people go into a building and sit down and disrupt the orderly functioning of an office, as they did in the case of Dr. McCook, we had to take some action to call a halt to it.
When they feel they have to carry out their fight this way, it's unfortunate that they do. We'd rather talk to people rather than have them react in that fashion. And I'm glad that the responsible civil rights leaders are giving us a chance to see what we can do.
There's just a bigger struggle on the black